Good morning, Susan. Thank you so much for joining us. Who commissioned this report, first of all? Who were you collating this for?
I was part of an independent advisory group that was established by the Scottish Police Authority right at the very beginning of the pandemic in April 2020. And the purpose of the advisory group was to provide scrutiny around the police use of the new powers that they'd been given under the coronavirus regulations. So the research that I did was undertaken as part of that scrutiny role, and we were monitoring the police use of the powers right throughout the pandemic. This report that's been published yesterday is a kind of culmination of all the work that we've done over the last 2 years.
Your main findings, I've mentioned some of them, particularly the fact that those in more deprived areas were more likely to be fined for breaching COVID rules. Why?
Well, unfortunately, the data doesn't exactly tell us why, although there are some clues. So the data tells us that over the entire pandemic, those people who were living in the most deprived areas were more likely to be issued with fines, and by a factor of about 2.5. However, the more interesting thing is that we see a distinct shift over time in that social profile of who was being subject to enforcement. So during the first lockdown, when we were all told to stay at home and the most strict kind of regulations were put in place around what we could and couldn't do, we actually saw that the difference between the top and the bottom of the deprivation spectrum was 12. In other words, people in the 10% most deprived areas were more than 12 times more likely to be fined than those in the least deprived areas. However, that social gradient changed over time. So by the time we got to the second lockdown, those people in the most deprived areas were less than 2 times more likely to be issued with a fixed penalty. So what that's telling us is, first of all, that the reasons and the types of breaches of the coronavirus regulations changed over time. And it also tells us that the people that were breaching the regulations changed. In other words, as the pandemic wore on, there was more kind of waning of compliance, more lockdown fatigue. We actually see breaches amongst a wider swathe of the Scottish population.